Montoya, the Executive Director of the Philippine Council for Health Research and Development.
Thank you. I don't think it's good or bad, but to be the last speaker in this very successful forum is, I don't want to be anticlimactic, but I'd like to probably just synthesize what has been discussed by our panelists and also proceed to the learnings that we've gotten based on the experiences of the likes of Dr. Destura and the reviews done by Dr. Madrigal. So first of all, I come from the health sector, and I'd like to discuss first some changes in paradigm. The healthcare industry in the Philippines is basically the R&D component is mostly foreign-based. For the pharmaceutical companies, for example, most of the R&Ds are based abroad. It doesn't happen here. The pharmaceutical companies here in the Philippines are really more into the assembly, packaging, but the raw materials are actually taken from other countries. The R&Ds happen elsewhere. The paradigm shift there is that I think we have to facilitate and encourage our local companies, how small they may be, to engage in R&D. My experience is that most of our companies are very calculating in terms of risk. They're no risk takers or low risk takers. Because of that, we become late adopters. You know, in the cycle of adoption, you have innovators, you have early adopters, you have late adopters. We actually belong to the late adopters. It's really seeing that it succeeds first in other countries before we take the lead. But I think if you want to really compete and take the pioneering step, it helps to be the first. There's always an advantage of being the first. Maybe you have to learn from your mistakes. You have nothing to start with. In fact, I don't know what mistakes you have to learn from. But because you're the first one, you have the bragging rights, and everyone follows after you. For example, as a case in point, this NCOV situation, there's a mad rush for developing the good diagnostic test for NCOV. But for example, and Dr. Destura will probably know about this, you have to think differently from the rest. So most of the people are talking about detecting the virus in the blood. Maybe you have to go to the detection of antibodies. And in fact, this is the trend that's going now. Because once you have the primers now in RITM and the test isn't available, there are limitations to the kit. Because you may miss out on the detection of true cases. If you check for the presence of the virus, for example, you might be catching the patient in the window. It's too early, no symptoms, that worked up. So you don't know whether these patients are actually infected or not. But the diagnostic test using antibodies doesn't make a delineation whether you have the infection now or you have the infection 1 week from now or 6 months after. It doesn't matter. You'll be positive with the diagnostic test. That is why in this particular situation, you take the lead. So a laboratory in the Netherlands, for example, developed the antibody testing for NCOV. We already talked with the developer, Marian Koopmans of the Erasmus Medical Center. Maybe we can have a discussion later. She's willing to work with us to develop the kit for the antibody detection, not the detection of the virus, detection of antibodies. In this case, you'll be able to get a better picture of the burden of infection. Alam ko kasi issue ngayon, sasakay ka talaga dapat because may nagsasabi wala pa daw tayong community transmission. How can you possibly say that there's no community transmission? You're not testing all of the people who are supposed to be tested. We're testing only the people who have symptoms. We don't know whether those who are symptomatic contacts or secondary, tertiary contacts of the people who are infected already carry the virus. You don't have the symptoms, but we're not testing them. See? The case fatality rates are up because their denominator is low. So if you actually look at all of the population, the case fatality rate is supposed to go down. And then you will be able to address the panic of the people now. So First case in point, you have to be responsive, dynamic, mabilis ang galaw. Dr. Destura, when no one was talking about dengue diagnostics, nandun siya kaagad. So, that is something that we have to learn from. Hindi tayo dapat yung nag-iintay na lahat ay gumagawa na at saka tayo sasama. No? I mean, there's a lot of advantages being there. Second one is investments in R&D. As I said, the private sector should invest more. I should share with you our experience. Of course, the biotech end is one, but I'd like to share another example, which is the Access.Me system. It is the first effort, I think it's the first situation or experience that we've had to co-investing with the private sector in the technology. And this is an e-implant, which we partner with Orthopedics International. I can say we pioneered in this aspect because even NETA doesn't have a public-private people partnership when it comes to R&D. No? They only talk about buildings, infrastructure, but not for R&D. So when it came to them, asked for policies, they said, kayo gumawa ng policy, hindi namin alam niya. So we did that, and we took the risk. And of course, magandang sabihin kasi ito sa success story. No? So we have the e-implant, it's tailored to the Filipino, not to the Americans, not to the Caucasians, it's tailored to the Filipino. It's 40% cheaper than the commercial counterpart, and it comes with a training for orthopedic surgeons to be able to do the knee implant at the fastest time and at the soonest time possible. So it enables people to access technology on a wider scale. If you remember, President Estrada went to Hong Kong just to have a knee implant. Maybe now, if President Estrada had the same problem, hindi na kailangan siya pumunta ng Hong Kong. Nandito na. So we can do it here. Second one is prioritization and people talk with each other, interaction. Malaking problema kasi sa research community ang overlapping researches, duplicating. How do you minimize the duplication? So you have to make sure that we have a research agenda and somebody monitors the research agenda. In the health sector, we do a midterm analysis every 3 years of alignment to the research agenda. We're actually inching, I say inching because we started at a very low 11%. Now it's at 21%. The reason being is that the private sector has its own money. They invest regardless of the research agenda of the country. But there is a leverage there because bago ka makagawa ng research sa isang bansa, kailangan talaga ng or the Filipinos to benefit from it. And it has to undergo ethics review involving human participants. Pag pumunta kayo sa ethics review committee, ang unang lang tatanungin, ito ba ay benepisyo sa Pilipino? Pag wala, forget it. Hindi siya magagawa. So doon kami pumapasok in terms of influencing the private sector to actually invest on areas that are really relevant to the Filipino need. Kung ano yung kailangan ng Pilipino, yun ang gawin nyo. Because before, they come here to do clinical trials because it's the fastest way and the easiest way to recruit patients. But they don't necessarily consider that the product would be of benefit to the Filipinos. So, nag-participate sa trial, pero hindi ba tayo mag-benefit? So that would be an ethical issue, and that goes into the ethics review process, and we keyword that. We have to be realistic. Kaya ba natin gawin lahat ito? Do we have the critical base of researchers? Kasi having all the money in the world is one thing, but who will do it is another thing. Yan ang problema namin sa DOST. So may pera, pero minsan yung nag-research ay the same people over and over again. And if I should mention the points raised by Dr. Madrigal and Dr. Destura, we have to really expand our base. So paano mangyari ito? We need to have champions like the likes of Dr. Destura, Dr. Madrigal, to share to people that, you know, the best thing forward for the Philippines is not to be a movie actor or a boxer or basketball player. I just need to be a scientist kasi that's where your gray matter will really work. It wasn't sabi ko ng gray matter yung tatlo. Pero sabihin ko, I think it's more challenging and more exciting. No? So, having said that, we we have the success stories, also learning from our long process, the RX box. We learned a lot from the RX box. But the RX box came from a vision that is to make sure that each Filipino have the best access to quality healthcare, to make all Filipinos able to see a doctor in their lifetime. Can you believe na 6 out of 10 Filipinos don't see a doctor in their lifetime? Or 5 Filipinos die without seeing a doctor? Because, far-flung areas, doctors are in the city. So ito yung vision. Kaya lang, hindi ganun kadali. Kasi we have to have the connection in place, Wi-Fi, etc. Anyway, having said that, I think we all agree that this whole exercise is needed because we have to learn and we have to move forward. And I think the DOST is in a good position to lead this. Before we were a voice in the wilderness, now with a voice with the whole of community, whole of government. It's now realized that S&T, R&D is really the engine for national growth. So I should end at that point and hope that we learn from all of these sharings, not only from the government side, but also from the private sector. And let's all work together to move this country forward, to move our country forward to greater heights. Thank you very much.